Another episode of The Next Fix. And this young lady and myself, this is Reverend Rachel Harrison, right? And so it's been more than 2 years I was on her show. And so she was jogging my own memory about my own journey. It was kind of a wild experience. And so this conversation is going to be fantastic. But I want to know first, uh, Rachel, how are you lately? I want to know that. How have you been?
Well, first, you're very sweet to say young lady. Mid 50s is what I am. I'm fabulous. I'm really good. I am in a place of peace and happiness and excitement. I've got a new book coming out and my life is I have a little grandbaby, you have a baby, I have a little grandbaby. Life is pretty good.
Yes, populate the earth. We're doing it.
With those that'll come and bring light and help it all come into beauty.
And yeah, it's the true light and dark. You go from like despising a little person in the moment and then like seeing that they are the light, right? Back and forth, back and forth. And what an amazing adventure. And so, as we typically do here, though, and I know that you've got a bit of a journey. And so, where we begin is usually where the train came off the tracks. So, we want to know because you have a sobriety story, you've got a recovery journey, and so now we get to hear about yours, and I wanna know how things were when they were pretty dark or not so great. We'll start there.
Okay. Well, my sober date is February 10th, 2018, which I always say was my second sober date. Being somebody who does not have the gene for addiction or for alcoholism, I have the discomfort in my own skin that created the need to have anything relieve me of the discomfort that I felt about being here, and other people.
Now I wanna ask real quick, right, because I believe I have the gene. I say
Mhm.
that because my mom and my dad, both addicts, alcoholics, so it's like, that's my kind of proof of concept that I have the gene. So why do you say that you don't?
Because I'm married to a man who has the gene, and my children have the gene. So
Alright.
I know the difference between and I remember your story. I remember how impactful your story was to me when you came onto my podcast and talked about it. And I work predominantly with people on the Al-Anon side. So it's kind of interesting. Like my community tends to be the codependents, people pleasers who have addiction in their life. But when my husband or my kids take in a substance, there is something in them that just craves and wants more. One is not enough, right? And mine was more of a like I was so sick when I drank. The first time I ever drank, I threw up. The second time I ever drank, I threw up. And so you would think, you got to quit doing that. Doesn't feel good. Some part of me thought that peace that where I felt for a moment, like I could be in situations that I'm usually uncomfortable in. I got to figure out how to do this better so that I can have this protective layer on me. But I never was somebody who no, that's not true. At the end, I was doing all of the blacking out and all those things. But, in the very beginning, I had people who could just drink so much around me and they would pass out or they would have, fun times. Mine was drink, feel a little reprieve from this discomfort that I felt, and then violently sick. So
Same
I
night,
never
or was it the next day, or when did you pay for it?
always the same night.
Okay,
I was
right.
a throw up that night person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting to think like when I'm thinking about like college. I didn't really drink that much in college, but every time I would go, do something, and so I would throw up. So then I discovered pot, right? So really my first feel comfortable in my skin was marijuana. And so then I could smoke pot. And then when I turned 21, I worked at a bar and I had a Long Island iced tea for the first time. And that was such a high level of euphoria that was really kind of when drinking started for me, but I still didn't have the, like, once it's in, it's all I can think about. It wasn't until I had an adult life. There's a lot to go through, right? So, okay, so I sort of drank at that time. I met my husband at 22, and he was cute, and he partied like I did. So,
It's always good to
we
have things
had
in common.
cute, and partied like I did. And so we fell in love and, partied and did those things. But I remember watching him and thinking, huh, I don't have the same, I can't get enough. And so if I went just a little bit too far, if I didn't manage myself just enough, then I would throw up, which I did all the time. And so we have our life together, but then we start having babies and it was no problem to quit when I would get pregnant. No
Okay.
problem.
Sure, sure.
Like happy to stop drinking. And so then, and then I nursed the babies. And so then basically you didn't drink for 2 years and
Right.
it was not a problem at all. But then I would come back and then I start to drink a little bit more. Well, Rich's drinking to me started becoming the problem in our family. His addiction in my story and in my life was where I put all my energy that if he would just quit being an alcoholic, if he was the problem, but my drinking wasn't the problem. All the while, I'm completely sick in codependency and people pleasing and all the stuff that, the sickness that you get in Al-Anon of feeling like somebody else is the problem and trying to control them. So
Did
that was
he,
really our issue.
did did he kinda take the stage? Did he have a pretty serious problem? When I say that, I think of a relationship that I had, and I took the stage. I was way over the top. I was always more drunk than everybody, and I was always very clearly I had an issue, and so the person I was with used that as, "Well, I'm not as bad as him." And it just hers just, like, lingered longer because mine was just very clear, but it like a situation kinda like that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that. I don't think Rich ever thought that he had a problem the same way that I thought he had a problem because he was so acclimated to that type of behavior from his upbringing in Los Angeles, California. And
Okay,
so, for his family, I mean, he still talks about today, love meant you drank together. And it wasn't like you were a bunch of like no goods. These were high end LA socialites. So it was, this is what you do. This is how you are. I would say, yes, he was the big one with the big energy. To me, it felt like I didn't know who I was going to get. I was either going to get the manic one that he could, in a second, he could go from being super fun to like, you know, not so fun. And the kids, didn't really know how to react around it. But I don't think because he was never violent or it was hard. It was hard energy, but yes, so I could put all the energy out on him, and all the while in between my having babies and having these moments where I'm not drinking as much, I'm using alcohol to try to manage how I feel and to connect with him, right? Like cuz this was this thing that we did that we were good at. And so
right.
we would have these things like I have this one particular memory. We went to New Mexico to get this camper trailer, and it was quite the ordeal to go get this camper trailer. And we get it on top of the pickup truck, and we're driving back, and we're tired, and we start bickering a little bit. And so we stop at the gas station and get roadies, right? And I remember like that feeling of as soon as we got the roadies in us, there was this 30 minutes of reprieve where we whatever that drug was that was for us, like, lightened up the mood, and we started laughing and giggling and thinking about how fun it was, and then 45 minutes in, the fight is just like it just went from 10 to 100, and then the whole rest of the drive home, we're driving drunk, we're a mess, we're fighting with each other, and we get to the end and you're like, "What are we do" I mean, that was our life. That was
Right.
it.
And that's what I keep saying is that, like, smart people do drugs and alcohol because it works. Now, it doesn't work very well for long. But, if I do cocaine, I'm gonna be on top of the world for the next 10 minutes. Like, it is
That
it
that
is what happens. Now what
you're
happens in
borrowing.
15, is an issue. because now I gotta get more cocaine, and then I got so so, but yes, that first 30 minutes of alcohol it's euphoria, it's bliss, you're not really impaired, and then just shortly after that, boom, you've got issues. Now the anger is multiplied, and are you
Totally.
swerving around all over the road? So, yeah, that is super, accurate as far as how I think too.
We got and it's so interesting because 'cause I'm still married to the same person. We've been together I'm 56, and I've been together since I was 22, so 30 something years, right?
Congratulations. That's
Thank you. It's a miracle all on its own. Uh, we got sober at one point because his mom had died, and, he had been around so much addiction. There was this moment of kind of like grace where he could see that she died at 74, right? That part of what happened in her dying so young was that she hadn't been like a drag out alcoholic. She was a party with the friends kind of a gal,
not
a
like
little afternoon.
drinking a bottle in the closet, but drinking
Yeah.
off. Right, 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 right.
Often and every day with friends and a little, but you took a toll on her. And so there was this moment where it was like, our kids are still young. We've got to do this thing. And so we went, diligently into AA. But I didn't go admit that I was an alcoholic. I went because I was so excited that my husband was going to finally quit drinking. Right. And it was very clear to me that he was an alcoholic, but I never admitted that I was an alcoholic. But I did the steps and I had the success that you have. But I think all the time about how it's the first step you have to do right. It's the only one you have to do perfect, right? Is to admit you're powerless. And then we both fell off of meetings and we were extreme dry drunks because we had nothing, like literally no solution.
Right.
And our oldest son, was starting to have some issues and starting to fall into what happens when you are sensitive, or what happens when you're a teenager in the midst of an alcoholic dysfunctional home. And I've done so much work with people now. I have so many more viewpoints and vantage points from, and I'm sure you feel this way from your coaching as well. It's like, we start to really see this system. And I have so much more compassion for the fact that my oldest son, who was predispositioned to addiction from genetics and had a sensitive nature, that the pain that he experienced in our family from all of this sort of push-pull chaos, so much love in the family, but you never quite knew who you were going to get. He responded it to in a way that we labeled as a problem child. And so then it's almost like my husband, who had been kind of the focus of being, the one who had the drinking problem, all the focus went to this kid, who was the kid was the problem.
Yeah.
And it became that's the problem that needs to be fixed. And so even though we weren't drinking, we were still in our dysfunction of blame and not doing the work that you end up needing to do on yourself. So even though I had done some of the 12 steps, I certainly was not doing it for me. I was just learning how to be more controlling of them. And
Sure.
so eventually my husband and I split up and we both went back to drinking because he's doesn't have an ultimatum over his head of if you drink, I'll leave. And I'm not the alcoholic. So I've started drinking.
Right, 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 right.
And then our older son, at that time, he was 16 or 17. He went to residential rehab. And then my husband and I got back together. And what do you think that while my son's in rehab, what do you think my husband and I did to rekindle our relationship?
Man. I
We went out drinking.
Oh,
Fucking
man.
idiots. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Right. Right. Well,
God,
I thought it was
I look back.
peculiar that yes, you split up and found your own reasons to start drinking again, but, like, you're still participating in it, and that's what you do, right? Even when you're apart, you're still kind of participating in it, and so you get back together and you rekindle the old flame with getting into the sauce, and so, I mean, in the moment, right, I get it, right? Like, it's from the outside in and looking back, yeah, you're so awful, right? So what exactly was there any clarity in that? Did you both know that that's not an option?
To be really honest, I think that's the bottom. That's the darkness that comes where you lose hope. There was definitely this moment where I realized I had come back and there was no for me at that time, there was no making that decision again. I had higher hopes of what it would be like for us, and we just fell even further into um, really dysfunctional behaviors because now we're in our 40s and we've really established unhealthy belief systems and patterns that come from lineage down the line, and we're not doing anything right. I'm not a genetic alcoholic, but alcohol is an addictive and a substance that will kill you. So if you're someone like me who may not have the genetics for it, drink it long enough and you will have a massive addiction. I mean, it's just the nature of alcohol. It's poison, right? So even though I didn't have that same craving kind of thing that my husband and my kids will report that they have, by the end, I was literally drinking myself to death. I didn't think there was hope for a happy life. I thought I had screwed it by coming back. I thought there was no hope for our family. Our son at this point was not rehab didn't work because he came back to our house with
Right.
all
So
the
he
same shit that he left. He
yeah.
went and got better, and then he came back to us, parents who were drinking, parents who hadn't worked on their stuff, parents who were still in their mess. So what did he do? He went right back out and,
Yeah.
like, went deep into what he had been doing, but worse, right? Lost him, right? And so in that was, like, the place where I think that I feel so much for people when they're in that despair because you forget who you really are.
Yeah.
And in there, you have a soul, a higher self who's trying to remind you, but you're so foggy.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when my husband is the one who actually came to me, and we did have these little beautiful moments that still happened. And one was that he and my younger son had found stand up paddleboarding on the Colorado rivers. So they would do these big rapids on
Right.
stand-up paddleboards, right?
Right, right. It's just
It
not
was nuts.
yeah, I can barely stand up in the Florida ponds that are still,
Yeah.
right? So right,
So
okay,
it was a whole season of this particular sport, and there was competitions, and they would travel all over the state doing these contests, and they were in the GoPro games, and so Rich was drinking less and less because he wanted to be a better athlete.
sure. Right,
But he still never was going into the "I'm an alcoholic, I was born an alcoholic," like that space. And so he came to me one day in 2017 and he said, I think we should quit drinking. I literally, Ryan, I mean, I didn't think there was hope, for any of us. Instead of me trying to get him sober anymore, I was so lost. But there was just this moment that moment of grace where your higher self whispers to you and says, like, if you don't do this now, like, you've got to do something. So I had had a trip planned to Thailand with my mom in February. And so I said, I'm going to go on this trip and I'm going to titrate down. I'm going to use it as my detox trip. And when I come back, I'll get sober when I come back. And it was such some people go to rehab, some people do different things, but all of that is just a place to have a gap to remind you of your wholeness for just a second, just to give you a moment of grace, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so I got away from all the chaos. I went on this amazing trip with my mom. I was raised Tibetan Buddhist, so we went and did all this Buddhist stuff. And I was away from my family for 3 weeks, and I remembered that my life was worth living,
mm.
which is pretty wild, right?
Well, being apart makes the heart grow fonder, and that's a real thing, like I had mentioned, I got this two-year-old kid and he's kicking me in the middle of the night and everything, and it's like I feel like the moment he's gone for an hour, I there's nothing more that I miss on the planet, and so but you get clarity and you get your priorities kind of back in line, Now, I've always appreciated that you have this blend, right, of it's like the metaphysical approach and then the Tibetan Buddhism background, and you've got all these really cool and different elements of your special sauce, right? So when you get back, I'm imagining, something you got to work on something, right? What really did you lean into, and what would you say leveraged your efforts in sobriety?
I think that I had a moment, and I talk about it in the book, that my husband picked us up from the airport. And here I've had like this 3 weeks of like reprieve, right? And I like all good alcoholics, I drank on the plane because it was gonna be my last drinks and it was free, right? So I drank until they quit serving me.
Yeah, it's so like it can't just be the one. Like I'm like, where the heck are they? Where
No,
the
no,
heck
and
are they?
it couldn't be my last ceremonial beer that I had on the beach or something like that. No, it was like free wine and beer. Okay, it's my last time. Anyway, so my husband picked us up and I'm tired. I've been drinking for however long the flight was. And my husband, we get in the car and he just lays in to everything that happened while I was gone and how crappy my older son was and all the things that happened. And it was like I was watching my life and I could see how it didn't have to be that way. I just had 3 weeks where it was different. And I had this moment where I shifted and I said, "I've been spending all my time and energy wanting to make him be something else, make his relationship with his son be something else, make him be something else." And so it's literally like this, 40-minute ride home from the airport, listening to him, that I had this deep knowing within myself that if I didn't do this for me, that I could never claim my life. That I had to be willing in that car ride. I'm like, I'm going to be willing to leave my husband. I'm going to be willing to leave my son who is falling apart. I have to be willing to let them be whoever they are. And I've got to save myself. And so the next day, was the Friday night AA meeting that had been my home group that I had gone to all those years ago. And I walked back in, and for the first time, I sat down and said, "My name's Rachel, and I'm an alcoholic." And that was the moment where I didn't ask my husband, "Are you coming to the meeting?" I didn't, it was for nobody else except for me. And that was the shift that I didn't do any of the work for anybody else. I
Right.
did it for myself. And I assumed that my marriage was going to fall apart and I had no idea what was going to happen with my son. That's that moment where you have to, by the grace of God, there go I, like if I don't save myself, this is not even to like help anybody else, but like Ryan, one time I was in this room in despair. This is my art studio, which is now my podcasting and coaching studio, and I just wanted to die. Not that I would hurt myself. I think that sometimes it's really around just you're in such darkness and such despair that if you could just flip the switch and have this game over, like game over. Next time, maybe it'll be better, right? And being raised Buddhist, I believe in reincarnation. And I was in this place, and that higher self, the voice, the intuitive voice came in and said, "Rachel, this is a very special lifetime. And I know you're having a hard time. But girl, you are white, educated, and in America. Like we gave you a pretty good start. And you have to go through this and you have to be in it. And there's purpose for it. Man up, basically,
Yeah.
quit quit denying this experience that you're having." And I remember kind of being like, "What do you mean?" And now I look and I think that was really my higher self saying, "This is your precious lifetime. This is your precious lifetime." And that's what I got when I went back into AA in 2018 was um, my husband did come into the rooms. He was the one that wanted to get sober, but I didn't ask him if he got a sponsor. And then I went into Al Anon, which was lifesaver, right? I'm surrounded by addicts. Both my kids got DUIs around that time, which was a lifesaver. I have this picture around 2000. We're all at a meeting at the same time because they're on on DUIs, and it was the beginning of kind of recovery for everybody in their own right. But I quit being responsible for their recoveries, and that's when I started talking about my journey on my phone in a voice memo and uploading it in the Recover Your Soul podcast. And it's become, what it's become. And it's because we're all on our own unique journeys to walk.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so much more powerful to just walk that path first, to be the leader, to be the first in the family, I mean? And so I feel that leverage, right? Going back to what I had asked about the leverage, you had leveraged an effort that you or an outcome that you desired. Your biggest leverage was you doing it yourself for the right reasons for yourself. And so by doing that, and now let me ask you though, is everybody else, are they sober, or like, is that, have they found that success as well, or are they all right?
You know, in 12 step, we talk about making a decision. And I think that for me, I had this awareness that it was a decision that I had to make. I knew that once I made that decision that gonna I wasn't gonna alter it. For me, I'm that kind of a person. I did have this little moment where Rich and I were going to meetings together and we were reconnecting, just like how we did with our old friend Jose Cuervo. We were reconnecting with this friend, which was becoming recovery and meetings, and that was date night and things like that. And then, he quit having a sponsor and he quit doing the work. And I was grateful that I was in really deeply in Al-Anon at that point, where I could clearly see that he had made a decision to better himself, but it didn't look like what my decision was going to look like.
Interesting.
And so I didn't ask him when the pandemic hit. And so there weren't, you had to really want to go online and do meetings. And by then, I haven't really gone to meetings since the pandemic. And it's not that I really love AA and I love the meetings, but by then I was fully immersed in this spiritual program and this spiritual life. And I was studying to be a metaphysical minister, and I was starting to coach, and I speak at New Thought churches in the Denver area. Like I was so immersed in my spiritual program. I felt like having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. I was sharing the principles of recovery and spiritual recovery in ways that were outside of the rooms. So I
Yeah.
thought that Rich was sober, but I was practicing Al-Anon and not asking questions. So, including up till the other day, because I just reposted an episode called I'm Married to an Alcoholic. And I ran in the house and I said, "Hey, before I post this episode, I want to confirm that you're about to hit your 2-year anniversary." And he's like, "I'm not."
See, it's just
Yeah.
happened.
So this was literally just the other day. So over the years, he's continued to share with me, usually it's every year, that he dabbles. So for him, that means that, he's in a band as his hobby, that, he'll have a beer every once in a while. Um, if I wasn't on the journey that I'm on, it could really piss me off, because I want him to be on this same journey with me, because it would feel more certain, it would feel safer, something along those lines.
Like whole, like what your mind is telling you that whole is.
Right. But he has never even come close to drinking the way that he did. And he is shifted and changed so much over these 8 years that I wouldn't respect the journey that he's been on if I got all a Twitter over drinks every once in a while.
Right.
My old self said, "If you drink, I'll leave." My new self has had very honest conversations with him that has said, my world is around spirituality and mindset and being uplifted and like daily dedicated to being awake. And I need and want a partner who is awake with me. And that is incredibly important to me. I do not want to make you be anything other than who you are. I never want to change you. I don't want to, you're not a project to me. But I will tell you that I am in a place in my life where I've gotten really clean about I have to save myself. It's the same woman that sat in the car that day and said, I have to be willing to let everything go so that I don't fall into my old addiction, which is people,
Mm,
which is codependency,
yeah.
right? So the drinking was really a cover of this underbelly codependency, which is what a process I now call recover your soul are these 9 steps to uncover that underneath thing. So those conversations are real conversations. Those are hard conversations to have with somebody who's like, I love you and you're my person. I'm not telling you who to be. I'm just saying I'm powerless over you. I'm powerless over the choices you make. I'm powerless over how you see your world. I'm powerless over whether you decide to have a drink every now and again, but I will not abandon myself ever again.
Do you think it's either think that, his behavior has anything to do with you abandoning yourself? Like, are you like, "Well, I'm just not alright with that," or are you happy that
If he drank more than what and this is the hard part about what happens in these situations is the trust was eroded, right? So, and he's like, "Well, I'm not lying to you." And I said, "Well, you are by not sharing information is deceitful. If he had actually done the 12 steps with a sponsor, he would get to the part where that counts as being alive." I wanna believe that it's just every once in a while, but I'm gonna spend more energy on the positive and really profound shifts and changes that have happened in our relationship that
Right.
are beautiful.
Yes. Yes, because I say this a lot, like, if you can do heroin twice a year and that's it, I don't think that that's an issue at all. Like, I just don't happen to be that guy. Like, I that's not in the cards for me, and it's not in the cards for a lot of people because of the nature of that substance, right? But I truly believe if somebody is able to and be honest about it, like, then alright, they because it's like I find that the sin is the attachment. It is the lies that comes along with the activity. So, you know, covering it up and all of these other things that almost always come with it. But a person who can healthily and naturally have a couple of drinks, and if that's the truth, then in my mind, like I look at those types of scenarios, I'm like, well, good on you. I guess I'm almost like, all right, well, I'm a little jealous because that's great, and I'm not that person. And so like I don't look down on anybody. And if the two of you still have that closeness, but I don't want to just like dig in to the guy. He's not even here, right?
Well, he's Rich is so great. I talk about him all the time in the podcast, so, and
Yeah.
when I was writing my memoir, there was this moment where I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be really hard on him because I have to talk about, like, sort of the despair that I felt in the years and the things that happened in our marriage," and I came inside and I said, "I don't know if I should write this book because 'cause I'm afraid to hurt your feelings." And he said, "Sweetheart, you've done such big work for so many people. Don't worry about me. This is your perspective, this is your journey, this is your story, and I want you to be able to share it and say it 100%." I mean, that's the man that he is, right? So that's the part that I'm gonna lean into. Anyway, so he has permission, so go ahead.
Well, okay, so then you've mentioned your memoir. You haven't even said the name of the book, but I don't know anything about it, right? So I want to know about that. I want to know how it developed. What was the genesis? Like, what made you decide? You're big on decisions, right? Like, so where did that decision come from to actually, to put this work in with the book?
So the book's called Recover Your Soul: A Spiritual Journey of Healing from Addiction, Codependency, and People Pleasing. I mean, I've been doing the podcast now for 7 seasons. I've coached hundreds and hundreds of people. I've been leading retreats. So it's one of those things that kind of feels natural to want to piece it all into a cohesive space. It's like I talk about it, but it's not, put together in a package. And I actually had a client who had had huge shifts in her life, and she emailed me and she said, I don't know if this is appropriate because I'm a client, but I'm a ghostwriter and you have a book in you. And so we talked and I was like, I'm not interested in a ghostwriter because that doesn't feel authentic to who I am. I have been trying to think about a book and I've actually started a book, but I'm so full in all the other things that I'm doing. So we collaborated for her and she said, actually you have two books in you. The first book needs to be the memoir that talks about how you recovered your soul and how the steps were created from that. And then the other book will be more of a traditional spiritual self-help kind of process, kind of a book. And, as a memoir, a lot of people, one of my beta readers of the book said, I want more guts, and she had just read Elizabeth Gilbert's Down to the River. And I think that there is so much value in each of our ways of reporting and telling the story that is the incredible soul's hero's journey, and that each of us needs to tell it in the way that we tell it. And I think the reason why people are drawn to me is because even though, even in the podcast, I'm telling my story, I'm always telling our story. I'm always telling our story because
When you
for
say when you say "our," who exactly is
predominantly women,
okay.
but human beings. It's the story of losing yourself. It's the story of doubting yourself. It's the story of loneliness. It's the story of wanting to escape. It's the story of forgetting who you are. And so I'm not the kind of person, even in the podcast, who like goes into the gory details of what he said and she said, because I'm a big wide brush stroke kind of a person, right? So the memoir is really talking about how I came from this place where I really would have just flipped the switch if it was possible. But that higher self that comes online that says, soul is here on purpose in this body, in this lifetime. And whether you believe in reincarnation or not, you're Ryan this time and I'm Rachel this time. This is all we got in this one time. Now, I personally believe that we're souls that have different experiences, and all those experiences are here on purpose. And only being a human being can give you the level of experience that you can be as a human being, which includes laying on the ground, throwing up in addiction, which includes holding a brand new baby, which includes watching horrific things happen on television, which includes looking in the eyes of someone who's dying. I mean, it's all those things. And so the memoir is kind of a light sort of touch on my journey that talks about how, as I walked the 12 steps, another path awakened for me that I now call Recover Your Soul. So when I first started coaching, it was kind of like a modulated 12-step thing. And there's still some similarities for sure, because the 12 steps, everybody should do the 12 steps, right? I mean, they're profound. But it became more and more spiritual. It became more and more an opportunity to look at your soul's journey and to see the preciousness of your experience, which includes all of your emotions, and to be able to look at, what are the beliefs and the patterns and stories that I've been living from? Because, yeah, I mean, I often say if I could be that person that had a glass of wine every once in a while, but the person I am today, she wouldn't risk it. She wouldn't risk it because she loves herself so much. And the one that harmed herself through codependency and through alcohol, her story is so valuable and so important, but it's an entirely different person, like literally an entirely different person. And if they talk about how every 7 years your cells completely regenerate. So here I am 8 years sober, and I am every cell of me is different, and I
Right.
am an entirely different. I look different. I look different. I mean, you look at pictures of me from before, and I don't recognize her at all. I look different. I feel different. So the memoir is an opportunity for people to see themselves in this process of how do you love yourself more? How do you release the parts of yourself that feel shameful or dark and open up to them and be curious about them and walk the path to living your light. In 12 step, it's
Yeah.
having had a spiritual awakening and recover your soul. It's shine your light. You've come to this place. Now it's time to go out and be bright and shiny.
I I I love that you have the courage and an astounding amount of clarity about those your memoir. You mentioned several times that like you're using that story at its highest level, and that is to help somebody else. And I think that for those, because my book is like similar. It's memoirs. Each memoir is followed by lessons and kind of where I extracted those lessons and how I did it. Right. So, and I felt like it just made sense. But the overarching idea was like, okay, I cannot let this story die with me. I cannot let it live only in conversation. I have to get it out there, and I can't just tell it one by one. There has to be a way to get this, into a form that helps the most of the people that need help, right? So I applaud you because I feel like we both caught that same wave, right? Like it's like, all right, is a higher version of myself will not let this die without being echoed as many times as it needs to help as many people as possible. And so I have always admired people that stand up in the rooms and they tell their story, and there's somebody in that room and they may need to hear it and they are better for it. And I just think the next the next step is putting it to a book. And
Well, what I was going to say is I'm all excited because when AA started, there was nothing like it. There was nothing in mass that said, come in your most raw, vulnerable space and we love you and we accept you. The closest thing was church, right? And most churches, that's not what they were saying. Most churches were saying, there's something wrong with you, right?
mhm, mhm.
I believe that AA was the first place in mass that started to say, there's nothing wrong with you. And it's time for you to remember in the way that they did it. And then there was a whole period of time where that was the solution, right? So you had to walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous if you wanted to sober up. And I can't remember if it was part of your story, but it's definitely part of mine. There was a shift that happened around 2012 where it started to be more open. And there started to be different places. And, when I first started doing the podcast, I don't know if you felt this way, but I didn't know, I didn't want to say AA. I didn't want to say Al Anon because of the 12 traditions. And I felt like I was breaking something because I was going to do coaching, and I wanted to get paid for coaching. And I had sponsored so many people, but I was going to do it different. And I was kind of in this place where I was in a limbo. And in the first season, like my 8th episode, I mentioned Al Anon and the detachments. And that episode is still to this day my top downloaded episode. And it bounced. So it went viral. And I was like, I got to talk about it. I've got to talk about it because we can't keep this in the rooms because there's too many people that doesn't work for them. And
Yeah.
so I think that your story, my story, whoever's out there sharing the light story, shine the light because somebody needs to hear your voice, your story, your way. And whether people are writing books or coaching or, you and I are grateful that we get to do this, right? It's the person who goes in and one-on-one looks somebody in the eye and sees them in their pain and gives them a moment of grace to remember that there's another way and doesn't judge them and can say, "Oh my god, I did this thing with Ryan and it totally worked for me, and that might be what works for them." Or, "I went and did this thing with Rachel Harrison, it, did this thing for me." I love that there are so many more avenues now, and we've broken out there's only one way, because I also think in spirituality, I'm a pretty far out there woo-woo metaphysical person, I'll just say.
I love
And,
it.
sometimes I have to be cautious about remembering I'm not trying to make anybody think what I think. The only thing I want you to hear from me is you were worth it, that there is a higher power, a spirit of your understanding, and
Can you
that your
say
life
that?
is worth living.
I want that to be, because I ask people if, to share like a nugget of wisdom, but you just said it. And if you could just repeat that, like I was awesome. And I did not foresee those words. And now I'm talking too much. Can you just repeat what you had just said? Because it's really
Yeah,
awesome.
and when you are in that moment of darkness, the thing is that you are worth it.
Yeah.
You are worth it. And that every single thing that you have been through, every single thing has value, and that we can look at it with love. We can forgive ourselves. We can have compassion for ourselves in our journey, and we can actually begin to understand the story can be rewritten in a way that is around our hero's journey, that is a hero's story.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
are worth it.
I love it. I love it. And I'm such a big fan of like comeback stories and the hero's journey, that arc right there. That's a gift that we have carried as humankind for so long in so many ways. And it's the only real thing that I've noticed that is timeless, right? It's because it's what we all want, right? And we may not always feel like that we're living it, in its full breadth, but it's like, man, what a gift. But yeah, this is I love the work you're doing. So tell us like what the more specifics of the book, like, what's going on with that. And I know that you're steadfast in the work that you do. So like where can people find all of that? Get involved in a retreat or all of it.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot going on. So my website's recoveryoursoul.net, and I think of it as a community. So for me, it's not just a podcast, it really is a community. And I do a once a month free support group on Zoom that is my heart, that is just, people that come from all over the world, which is so fabulous. I do have steps that people can work, and I recently rolled out a collective, again feeling like community is the way for us to do it together, so that they can have access to all the steps. And I'll do monthly teachings, and I do retreats here in Colorado, and I've done them in other parts of the country as well. And then on April 13th, the book comes out, the Recover Your Soul book. And my number one goal is to be of service, because that family that loved each other but suffered so much is well. And my son, who uh, I didn't think was going to make it, is with a woman who loves him for exactly who he is. And he has a 1-year-old little baby boy and lives in California. Is he sober? No. But just like my husband, I'm going to look at the beauty in his eyes, and I'm going to see the changes that he's made. And I'm going to continue to dedicate myself to my wholeness, so that I'm radiating what that is. And we can have conversations, and he does not party in the same way that he did. And then my other son, my younger son, who also lives in California, recently chose sobriety. So he just picked up a 90-day chip not long ago, and is in the
Wow.
room and has a sponsor and does all my social media for me, which is on his little side hustle to make extra money. And, I feel like grateful that as a family, something that I never thought that we could get in those dark years, which is just to really be adults having our own lives and have deep respect and love for each other. And, I often say, do my kids look like what I thought that their lives would look like when I had a little 2-year-old and I had visions of what it was going to? No, I got tattoos on their hands, and, like they like it's a whole thing, right? I love my children for exactly who they are, and, I love us for who we are, but more than that, I love me for who I am, and that's the only place that I can make decisions about anything. So,
Yeah.
this work to me just continues to be an evolution of awakening and the ability to bring healing and awakening to the world in my voice that speaks to the people that it speaks to is an honor and a privilege.
It's a blessing, that's for sure. Well, I appreciate your time. Well, that being said, this has been another episode of The Next Fix. Thank you so much, Rachel. And I know we'll talk soon, sooner than the
Yes.
last time.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan.
See ya.